So we'll talk about multi-cloud secure access. Certainly we'll get into what are some of the key requirements or considerations you should be thinking about. What have people been doing today in terms of stopgap measures? We'll get into what's the tenets for ensuring appropriate, compliant, and secure access and protected access to resources that essentially no longer are just in the data center, and how to build an IT service so you really have an automated process to bring on new apps and new infrastructure resources in multi-cloud, but assuring secure compliance and policy. And last but not least, I am from Pulse Secure, so I'll be happy to tell you a little bit about our company and what we offer. So if you all remember, we used to have this thing called a data center. We used to have devices that were like, you could actually see them. They were corporate owned, right? So that's when we were living the dream years ago. So VPN certainly is not dead. It's well alive and breathing and is a standard practice for securing that access. But it's no longer simple. So if you look at where we're going, that IT resource that we know and that we trust, it may not be that corporate-owned device. We know it could be a BYO device. It could be a personal device, consumerization of IT. It could be an IoT device. It could be a personal Wi-Fi. All of these things are being introduced. The world is no longer sitting at their desk. We have a mobile workforce. And so resources can go and live not only in a private cloud, but they can also just be a SaaS application. So how do you ensure compliant access when the infrastructure is out there, when the perimeter is more open or doesn't even exist, and when your endpoints are not necessarily 100% trusted? So how do you lock this all down? And more importantly, not just lock it down, how do you ensure usability and availability for your end users to get to the resources they want when they want them? So what's driving this? We talked just a second ago about workforce mobility. So what we're finding with our clients, and just to give you an idea, we have about 20,000 enterprises worldwide using Pulse Secure solutions, and the majority of them have a mobile workforce. So they're either remote, they have multiple devices. I think the average employee has about 5 devices that they bring to work or work at home. So how do you ensure anytime, any means, anywhere access, and make sure that's appropriate access? Second thing is multi-cloud. So getting to the definition of hybrid IT, multi-cloud is basically we're using the most optimized delivery mechanism for our applications and resources to our customers and to our partners. So now we have things that are living in a standard data center. They're being migrated to a hybrid cloud offering. Maybe they're just being ported in a virtual environment to a private cloud. And certainly, a lot of folks are using SaaS applications. If you're a small to medium business, for sure, you're already in the throes of a hybrid IT environment. If you're a large enterprise, you're probably migrating to hybrid IT. How do you get consistent policy? Also, by the way, with multi-cloud, we're not just talking availability, but we're also talking how DevOps is moving into cloud and taking advantage of agile computing. So how do you ensure systems that can be spun up very quickly for test or even production, how do you ensure that environment also has appropriate means, appropriate zone protection, appropriate authenticated access, and knowledge of all systems accessing what could be sensitive data? On the visibility side, how many people today are concerned or have been talked to about IoT threats or IoT? Again, an overwhelming majority. Certainly that is very key. So in a complex data center environment, and now you have hybrid cloud, public cloud, how do you get visibility and intelligence on all the users and their devices that are actually accessing corporate resources or corporate sensitive data? Not only that, but without that intelligence, you don't have the analytics that you need to take it to the next level and actually do informed response or automated response. So if you can't see it, it doesn't exist. That's pretty old in the security world, but it's even more true for hybrid IT infrastructure. And last but not least, compliance. So we all live with these acronyms. There's a new one. How many people know what PSD2 is? It's not post-security distress order. It's not the latest PlayStation. No, PSD2, anybody? Go for it.
Payment Services Directive.
Yes, excellent. So that's in the banking or financial services industry. You're now responsible and have to ensure the use and access of your sensitive information by third parties doing business with your financial institution. So the requirements for enterprise multi-cloud is really an extension of what we've been doing today. We've already said in standard practice, you should have trusted policy and controls between users, devices, and the resources and the applications they're going to. However, trust was known in our data center, in our trusted LAN. Now we have ubiquitous access. How do we get that level of trust? How do we verify and then trust? How do we take a response to those that are outside policy? And how do we also get an idea of, hey, all policies to all access to the data are not created equal? So for example, I could be in the healthcare industry. My access control policy may need to be different in the emergency room than it would be for a hospital checkup, that it may be for an MRI system. So how do you set those parameters? And again, make sure you have adequate policy mapping and controls between those requesting access and the actual information, where that information may reside. So if I look at the current evolution, we've moved from the known devices to home networking, mobility, in the car. And what we've done here is built up some silos. So not something that's unusual. We have a layered defense model. So every time we had a new app or a new business case, we may have introduced a new gateway. Maybe we introduced cloud access service brokers for a particular business application. Maybe we introduced network access control for our on-premise system. But all these systems are trying to address different infrastructure. And all these systems may have different degrees of control, different management implementation. And that would be the same not only for standard PCs, but now when you get to mobile and IoT, they're going to have different security mechanisms and different extent of control that you can actually capture and make use. So the stopgaps we've been doing with multiple access systems, consoles, endpoint controls have to be put under one roof in terms of assessment and policy implementation, and then have to be officially deployed depending on where the data and resource is going to reside. On-premise, in a cloud, in a SaaS environment. Taking into considerations various user client support. How many organizations here use enterprise mobility management solutions? See a few hands. You, for example, does everybody have a mobility management, an endpoint solution on every one of their mobile devices in your organization, or are you selective? Everybody. Are you in financial services or what? Sorry? Yes. Okay. So that's very typical. However, as you go to other organizations, the economics of trying to manage and implement a fully blown system, and as you get global, where you have potential restrictions for use of a personal phone, that gets where it gets more complicated. So another thing is that not only do we have various end user client support, which may often be different client agent applications, but we also have very different policy and enforcement capabilities as well. So while one system may work really well, for example, to wipe a phone, it may actually disrupt that user's use of that phone completely, depending on how it's implemented and what level of support it has. Or for an IoT device, you may be able to identify that this device is an anomaly, but you may not be able to take action. So really, the network security areas have had a lot of visibility gaps and a lot of enforcement gaps by building up a siloed approach. Not only that, I think if we all live in a world where we have different consoles, different management systems, it makes it really hard to have uniform policy control, and it's pretty costly for management. So if I have a different agent and a different system for one implementation, and for example, in my retail stores, for their personal devices, I use one system. For my field team, I use another system. Every time I build up a new app or distribute a new app or build up a new infrastructure, I'm going to have disparate controls and a lot of maintenance. So what's the real tenets, or what's the foundation for multi-cloud secure access? So the first thing is really, again, looking at the operational environment. So you need to be able to support this varied infrastructure. So it shouldn't matter where the data resides. As long as you have a uniform set of policies, understand the controls, and understand the requirements, you should be able to have an automated mechanism to invoke control and to do so in a phased way that's non-disruptive. Again, we're talking about mobile users and devices. We're talking about those devices and users that may not be trusted, guests and contractors. How many people are in manufacturing? So if you have OT networks, which are secure, but the reality is, and the feedback we've received is, hey, what happens when a contractor comes in? They may be going through the firewall to an OT gateway, and then they have access to a variety of systems. So how do you orchestrate that control as well? Different types of users, from contractors, employees, guests, patients, and obviously different types of information. I mean, when you put this together, it's building out a really uniform matrix, and no one solution is going to answer all this, but it's how do you orchestrate that in an efficient manner. So we're talking about looking at different technologies for cloud, MFAs, SAML, looking at different application access mechanisms, software-defined perimeter, looking at how do you migrate from your standard VPN, which really is just authenticated access, to ensuring that that endpoint is secure and doesn't introduce harm, or that endpoint is secure, and if that data is with that endpoint, you know about that data, you know that they had access to it, maybe you can take a response should that device be lost or stolen. How do you incorporate all this in a centralized manner? So from a tactical standpoint, these are all the things you have to consider. If you look at it on the left-hand side, you're looking at pretty much the ISO stack, but you're also taking into consideration people and things. So directory services and systems. And then again, what type of networks, what type of infrastructure? Are you at the cloud? What information resources are being served? So is this a DevOps environment? Is this a mobile application? For example, in one country, mobile banking is taken to the next level, and literally the bank and the ATM is literally on a mobile car. All the authentication is going on literally on the spot, going back to a central headquarters. Also different if you're in, for example, in the police, where they are doing all the checking of everything in their car. How do you ensure availability and resiliency? That's another consideration for secure access. So it's not just your simple point-to-point connection, but it's making sure that when critical information is needed, that's available. So we put together some basic steps on how you would build an IT service model to deliver hybrid IT secure access. First starts off where's this data going to exist? So essentially you have a new business application or initiative. Is it merely a migration or porting that's existing in your data center to a less expensive data center or to a public or private cloud implementation? Are you actually building something new? Are you using Agile DevOps? Should that be how do you effectuate that in an environment where the build out is automated? Again, in a private or public cloud? Or are you buying an implementation, a software solution where it's going to be hosted, or it's actually going to be a pure SaaS environment? What you get to is the base level of, okay, where's that system or application going to exist? Now it's what are the security parameters associated with access to that resource or that application? So the first is, if you build an infrastructure, again, you're servicing your constituents, your business units, or your end users. You have a simple make or buy model. You look at the costs and logistics. Then you get to the point of, okay, let me scope out at least secure access to all that infrastructure. So you scope out, okay, how many users, how many devices, what's the process for request for access? And then you prioritize based on the project scope and the business impact. Next, you're going to map the groups, the users themselves, the applications or the resources, and what are the security requisites for appropriate access. As you're building this out, you're identifying the scenarios by group and type. If you're putting this into an ITSM matrix, it makes it so it's a very repeatable model. So every time a new app is going to be onboarded, you find out where it's existing, and then you apply the same rules and policies depending on if it's a pre-existing app to a pre-existing set of users or if it's new. Once you set that, you have the definition essentially of an access policy. And then you can apply that policy and test the policy. So has anybody implemented a network access control solution in the room? I see one or two have. Sure. So rule of thumb with network access control is if you turn it on with full enforcement, it's a great way to switch jobs. Or it's a great way to get a call from a lot of business units to say, hey, I have no access to resources, right? So the best way to implement access controls is to start off in visibility mode. So then you can then map out an understanding of what's the end user effect on productivity, what are the anomalies that you may not have accounted for, to document that out and then refine your policy or refine your controls before phasing in enforcement. So you're preempting issues of access, usability, disgruntled users, executives that you might have to have exceptions for or may not have determined, fully scoped out the scenario. The layer will depend on what's the implementation. So for example, in this solution, the layer, you should have access controls from the device, the network, the device. You're going through the whole stack. So if you're only doing, for example, an application layer protection, then that'll have certain restrictions and implementations. For example, I may not be able to, I can have point connection directly into the app, but I may not be able to have any control on the endpoint device. I have no endpoint device security. So yes, I've secured a protected direct connection from the device to the app that's authenticated, but that device could be a jailbroken device, jailbroken, it could be insecure, it could not have any security on it. And so that data that goes down there, once it goes away, I have no control. So it's trade-offs. It depends on the start of the policy of what's the project scope and what are the requisites. So Again, once you've rolled out the policy, a best rule of thumb, which we all do, is notification, notification, notification. So tell the end users of the policy, absolutely, but inform support, inform compliance, inform the SOC. How are you supposed to handle exceptions? How are you supposed to handle incidents? It sounds basic, but you would be surprised what we've seen from our install base when they've rolled out new systems that they may have neglected to inform a certain member that is going to handle escalations, for example. And then phase in the rollout. So for example, if you have a solution that's able to notify first before fully enforce on certain scenarios, you can then start changing user behavior. So maybe it's 2 or 3 warnings. Maybe it's another warning that goes to the department manager before you fully block on certain case scenarios. On other case scenarios, no matter what, black and white. For example, you may not want a system to be that's unknown in your payment processing environment. That's not a warning. That's an immediate block, for example. And last but not least, verify, tune, and improve. So this is a fundamental build to introduce a multi-cloud secure access service model for an IT organization. Whether you're large or small, the same thing can be applied whether you use your own tools or whether you go to a service provider. So let me tell you a little bit about Pulse Secure. So how many people have heard about Pulse Secure? See, now I see a lot more hands. You know, chances are you may have been using or have used Pulse Secure in a past life or today. How many people have ever flown a major airline? Good chances are that when you've actually registered to get your boarding pass electronically, in the background, that could be Pulse Secure, for example. If you've ever been pulled over by a major police department, good probability that somehow they're checking your background, but that secure connection, your privacy is protected by Pulse Secure. A lot of things that you order online, and you're able to get that screen up real fast and secure, good probability that e-commerce vendor in the background is using Pulse Secure. Your kids that are using gaming systems, same thing. Most likely, we're in the background, making sure that you have authenticated and at least secure access and high availability. So we actually were a spin out of Juniper Networks. So 2 divisions of Juniper, the Junos divisions, were spin out back in 2014. Comes with all that heritage of remote access. And then we've developed and matured those solutions to cover hybrid IT. So you're looking at proven solution, proven technology. We have about close to now 20 million endpoints secured. About 8% of the Fortune 500 across each one of the major verticals, including government. And we're a worldwide organization. So when we're looking at secure access, one of our prime directives is usability. Usability for the actual end users. Try to be seamless, non-disruptive, easy. They should know we exist, unless IT wants to express that existence. And more so, easy for administration. So we're orchestrating a lot of the connectivity that allows single sign-on and ubiquitous access using common protocols, but having it all centrally managed. And then with the value add of being able to ensure that the endpoint is secure. Maybe it's forcing particular VPN access based on application or an always-on VPN, for example. Making sure that there's full audit capability, on-premise and remote control, automated endpoint, not only enforcement, but endpoint remediation. This is all within our platform that you can buy in pieces or buy for a unified approach. And it's multi-cloud ready. So our solutions obviously start in the data center, but they're already cloud enabled. So as you migrate certain applications or certain environments, you get the benefit of using the same console, the same infrastructure, the same level of controls across mobile and standard PC and Mac OS environments, all under one roof, highly manageable, supports role-based access, supports distributed access. So this platform, again, covers the key tenets that we were talking about. So it's covering the ability to have one client to uniformly manage on multiple platforms, on multiple endpoint devices, including mobile devices, which means you can have a common policy-based structure. This is both for on-premise access control, remote access control, and cloud-based access control. Centralized visibility, so you can know who, what, where, when, what was the transaction. Broad interoperability, so we're a vendor that works with your popular directory services, your popular wireless controller infrastructure, network infrastructure, security infrastructure. So it's addressing those major tenets, again, because if you start out with visibility and then have a uniform, easy control mechanism, then you can slowly migrate and advance controls and automated response. So the portfolio and specifics that can be purchased together or as needed includes our VPN solution, award-winning, most mature on the market, most advanced on the market. Pulse Policy Secure, an award-winning network access control solution. Pulse Workspace, so this would be a lightweight enterprise mobility management solution. It's container technology, so you can ensure that endpoint mobile device is secure and has a segregated business environment to control access to applications and to protect data. It includes secure application delivery, load balancing, availability, cloud, leveraging the cloud for resiliency. And it's all centrally managed under Pulse One, central managed platform. So we have appliances, physical, virtual, and in the cloud. So you have all centralized, uniform way of management, one type of client, centralized management at the endpoint, real-time visibility and control at the endpoint, and something that's proven scalability.